to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here on the Unidentified Celebrity Review. I'm looking forward to today's show. We're going to tackle some tough issues, but hopefully have some fun along the way. It's really great to see all of you here waiting for this in the live chat. Great to see you, Preston, Matthew Riot, Justin S., and Simon Fly. Hey, Ryan Spray's here too. Really great to see you all here. I'm glad you can make it today. You know, if anyone's joining for the first time, please hit that subscribe button. And if you like what you hear, hit that notification bell on YouTube so you know just when to join us here on the live chat. Before we start the show, I want to share a realization I recently had. Now, although the scientific community has, until very recently, been weary to discuss possible extraterrestrial objects in our solar system, science has been taking UAP seriously and studying it for decades. In fact, they've been studying perhaps the most common type of UAP, a phenomenon that has been reported throughout the millennia. Orbs of light, moving erratically or sometimes with a seeming intention. They've taken many names throughout history, but modern science refers to it as ball lightning. And even though there is almost no physical evidence for this phenomenon, it's widely considered real in academia. There are dozens of papers on the subject, and there are dozens of people experimenting, trying to reproduce the phenomenon in a lab. While there has been some limited success in producing similar phenomenon in laboratory conditions, science is still unable to explain how a phenomenon such as that could naturally occur in our atmosphere. And even after decades of observing storms, they've been unable to directly observe it either. But they still believe it exists. They just accept that studying such transient and unreproducible phenomenon is inherently challenging. And while they likely think it's something different than all of us think it is, we're both looking for the same thing: more data and explanations. You know, I'll be providing a little more of that on this topic, as well as some very interesting properties of plasmoids in the next video on my channel, Rather Be Squidding. Be sure to head over and subscribe after the show. Also, be sure to check out yesterday's discussion on the Singularity Lab. It might change your opinion on which host here is capable of super villainry. Keep a close eye on that. Your hosts of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, Luis Jimenez and Michael Mataluni.
What the hell is that supposed to mean, rather?
I can't. I'm not sure if it's me or you.
Yeah.
One of you were saying that you might, if there was an asteroid coming, you would encourage it to come and wipe out.
Yes.
Listen to the show yesterday for a little bit more context.
It was just a suggestion of a possible reset to make society right this time around. You know, instead of society 4.0, we get 4.1.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a Thanos from the Avengers there a little bit.
I mean, do we want to live or do we not? Unbelievable. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez, Rather Be Squidding, and Michael Mataluni are my co-hosts. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here as always. Before we get started with today's show, which is going to be a really fun one, I want to say thank you to the sponsor, BlueMarlinChronicles.com. purveyors of the world's finest fishing tackle since 1995. Also want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all the tunes that you hear in the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Before we go any further, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, share the channel. We have a Patreon for everyone here. The links are in the description below. We are a public access channel supported by viewers like you. So if you want to see this show 5 days a week, which I hope you do, because that's what we do here. We provide a show 5 days a week. Please consider joining the Patreon. It's a great way to support and make sure that everybody has access to the same show. So with all of that out of the way, don't forget to, I got a couple more things. Don't forget to check out thebigphonehome.com. We got some news coming at the end of the show, so stay tuned for that. And now am I missing anything else?
I don't think you're missing anything. We've got a hell of a show for everyone today. For those of you just joining us, thank you. We go live here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Unidentified Celebrity Review. And we've got the Big Phone Home coming up very, very soon. But right now, you're here for some amazing guests and you're here for some amazing action. And I want to introduce you, ladies and gentlemen, to Zac Cichy. He's a dad, fiance, and weirdo, host of Project Human FM. Amazing guy. Welcome back, Zac Cichy.
Thank you for having me.
No, pleasure is ours, dude.
Great to be back.
Yeah, and then we've got one more guest, Michael.
We do. Chris Cogswell is joining us today. He's the founder of the Mad Scientist podcast and co-host of the Mad Scientist Roundtables. He has a PhD in chemical engineering with a focus on nanomaterials for absorption and separations. Welcome, Chris Cogswell. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great. You guys, I love the intros. Oh my
thanks,
God, they're
man.
so good. They're so solid, just so hilarious. Like,
thanks, buddy.
Good
Well,
stuff,
thanks for being here on the show for the first time ever. I've just become aware of your work, and it's what's funny is it kind of hit me in the middle of doing research for you. I was like, oh, wait a second, this is one of the guys from Sky Hub. I was like, oh, cool. And then we heard the Sky Hub news. I'm like, oh, then your message and Twitter started to make a little more sense to me. And I was like, oh God, oh, please say this is not the end of this. I want to talk to Chris forever.
So I used to have my own. I used to have a Twitter account that was like just for just like Chris Cogswell, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it never took off. Like my mom would like my stuff, and she was like the only one. And it's like, this seems weird. Like, I'll just go to the normal Twitter account that has actual people who do this. But yeah, I guess I was and am a Sky Hub guy. So
yeah,
it was it's good stuff. Happy to talk about that today. Of course.
I'm incredibly impressed and surprised that your mother knows how to use Twitter. I don't even think I could show my mom how to use Twitter.
Bro, she was on Twitter before I was. It's
wow.
Yeah, it's rough.
Cool
like
mom.
Back when I was just doing, doing the podcast kind of from the lab, she was like, you got to get on Twitter. You got to tell everybody about your show. My mom is like, you guys ever watch that show, The Nanny?
Yeah.
My mom is 100% the mom from The Nanny. Like, that's just who my mom is. Like, as a person, as a personality. So yeah, no, she's an influence for good. In the world.
That's awesome, dude. Twitter. So real quick, so for the folks, because again, I'm just now getting into the world of Chris Cogswell, and I'm listening to the first podcast, and I'm like, damn, this is so good. It's so smart, but it also made me question a lot of the things that I'm talking about. I'm like, what am I doing again? Like these existential crisis moments where you're like, God, is this just government tech fucking with me? Like, but if you can, just for the viewers in the audience, because we do have a lot of folks that are new to this scientific discussion of UAPs. And maybe we'll dive into a little bit with you if that's even possible. But if you can, just tell folks sort of how you started the podcast and your background and what inspired you to be where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, it all kind of comes back to my mom and her family. My mom is an immigrant from Italy, and my family growing up was really deeply sort of in both worlds of the sciences and also kind of the world of the weird, I guess you'd say. So I was just as likely to be going to, my mom's job to meet her friends there who were all doing, like finance and banking and engineering and whatever, or going to a friend's house of my mom's who was doing tarot cards, right? Or psychic readings, whatever. So we kind of always existed in both of those areas. And as I got older, I was always sort of impressed by the fact that I had very smart people in my life. My grandmother spoke like 5 or 6 different languages throughout her lifetime. She moved here with her family from Italy with no money, no real support, started a life here, built a family that ended up with, very successful people and just was always a very smart person. But my grandma also fell for just the craziest conspiracy theories, right? Like my grandma thought that if you put lemon juice on anything, it negated the sugar drink or eat for her diabetes, right? So I always was impressed with the fact that there's people who are very smart, but who hold kind of irrational or beliefs that don't make sense to me.
Kind of reminds me of that father from My Big Fat Greek Wedding who puts Windex on everything.
I'm telling you, man, it's like they had a camera in our house. Like Nona was out there, like, I'm gonna have this chocolate cake, but first, and shooting back the lemon juice.
So I don't know if it's an Italian thing and a Greek thing, but when I was a kid, my mother used to tell me that pinching causes cancer. She's Italian. She said that her mother told her that. And I was like 30 years old. I was like, Mom, you know that. Remember when you used to tell me pinching causes cancer? She's like, oh, yeah, it does. I was like, you're 45 years old. You know it doesn't. She's like, oh, yes, it does. She said, I'll call my mother right now. And I was like, I guarantee you when you call your mother, she's going to say she told you that so you'd stop pinching your brother. And she's like, no. And she called. She's like, yep, that's exactly what it was. I was like, you're kidding me.
I'm telling you, man, it's like, I think a lot of people, if we really talk to people and get people's real history and get into them with these conversations, right? You find out that everyone knows somebody who's seen a ghost or a UFO or something weird, right? Everyone has that person in their life. And so it's, for me, that question of how can somebody, or why do certain beliefs kind of move through society whereas others don't, right? Things like, let's say, like vaccine hesitancy is a really good example today, right? Where this technology has been out there since the 1800s, this idea of like germs and how they spread and everything else. And yet we're still having challenges to that base concept, really, of how disease spreads and how it works and everything else. So this concept or this idea of how do these things change or move around, that's always been interesting for me. So when I was an undergrad, that's what I tried to study as a philosophy major. But I also did chemical engineering, got a PhD focusing on kind of nanotechnology. And when I was in school doing my PhD, I would always tell my students stories about, the history of science or the philosophy of science, or even just stories about like UFOs or ghosts or whatever, stuff that I found interesting. Mm-hmm. And so that's how the podcast started, really. One night, my lab mate really was saying, you should just go ahead and make a show. And then like a week later, my wife suggested that I reach out to a podcast I still listen to all the time, Astonishing Legends. And they were looking for a person helping them with their science research. So I got to help them. And the first episode we did together was the Delphos ring. And then we did one on Lake Baikal, which supposedly has these like giant humanoid aliens that live inside of it. Super sweet. Oh. Okay. Anyways, that's how that started. And so, to like to slow down this answer, which is now taking 85% of the time you have for me tonight.
That's okay.
The reason that I got involved in UFO subjects, the reason I got involved in this subject in the first place was, working on Astonishing Legends, doing my own show. I met a lot of experiencers and people who were very interested in this and who really took it seriously. And it's impossible to talk to an experiencer and not come away with the feeling that this is somebody who believes that something real happened to them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got involved. That's why I started getting involved in these things.
Yeah. Well, that's it's interesting you say that, because I've had an experience as well. And for the last, especially since 2017, a little bit before that, because when Neil deGrasse Tyson started his podcast is when I really started getting back into science and sort of listening to people speak about science. And I'm like, God, I love this stuff. And he also helped me get out of a lot of rabbit holes with logical thinking. So that's what I also appreciated too.
Did he though?
Yeah, I think he did.
I mean, you're
what do you
making
mean
the
by
show
that?
now.
Well, no, it's true. It's true. But I'm making the show with I try to look. We always
just playing.
no. It's a good question. We always take the conversation seriously. We just try not to take ourselves too seriously. But especially since 2017, it's been a struggle for me because I've had an up close experience. But I also understand that critical thinking method of, a 28, 29-year-old memory is not something you should hang your hat on, because the human brain is privy to make a lot of mistakes. But it's hard for me to do that. Like I've already learned that's very difficult for me to separate. So I'm curious from your standpoint, Chris. I don't think you've had an experience from what I've gathered, but you do listen to these stories and then you say you walk away, believing that this person believes that they had this experience. So do you have any advice for people like me who try to compartmentalize their experience from science, from real logical, critical thinking? And can you have both? Is it possible, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so actually I always tell this story and I try not to harp on it too much because, it's, I try not to harp on it too much, I guess, just because it feels self-indulgent and unnecessary. But when I was a kid, I had experiences. I totally thought I did. Until I was like 13, I thought I totally was abducted by aliens. You know what I mean? I didn't know if it was real or not. I had no concept of that really at the time. But when I was a kid, I woke up at night. I was in my dad's room was in my dad's room at night watching TV. It was way too late. And a green light shone in from the window. And then I don't remember anything else. Other times I've seen, what's the word? Kind of like, glowing birds or angels or whatever. Like those sorts of things were common to me. And frankly, I think that now it's because of a medical condition. I think I have sleep apnea. My brain doesn't get enough oxygen when I sleep. So I have very, 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 very strong dreams, lucid dreaming, all that kind of stuff happens to me quite frequently. So, I think that for the vast majority of human history, the metaphysical view of the world has been the dominant worldview. If you think about it, materialist science has only been around 200 years, maybe, if we give it even that long.
Right.
So
That's a great...
the idea, I take a view of a philosopher, Karl Popper, who essentially thought that this isn't exactly what Popper thought, but my view, I guess, is, or my take on Popper is, some statements are scientific and they exist in the scientific world, but other statements are not scientific and they don't exist in the scientific world. So you can have a scientific belief about UFOs or UAP, whatever you want to call them, right? So UAP, the reason UAP photos are, well, for example, like with SkyHub, right? We thought that our hypothesis was if you put a camera out there, it'll catch something eventually because these objects are there. That's a testable hypothesis, right? We can do statistics on that. We can determine whether or not something comes in a frame over a given period of time. That is different than saying, though, that we believe these are intelligent craft piloted by alien species, right? That is not a scientific thought. It's not a scientific statement, and it can't be tested, really, right? Because there's always the chance that the aliens are, they're tricking you, right? They're just hiding or they're whatever. So I really do think that for people who want to take this, there's always a metaphysical side and there's a physical side. So I would say that, there's my issue always is consistency, right? If you're going to argue to me that the UAP issue is a military issue, that it is a national security issue with this other things, you can't then also say that you think that these are Atlantean ships from the future or the distant past, right? Because those two thoughts they don't exist in the same world, right? It's like, don't talk to me about the Joker in a Spider-Man comic. They have different universes.
Right. No, that makes sense.
You've never read a crossover, Chris Cogswell?
I have, but they're always terrible, dude. Like,
what about the Wakanda theory?
The last good crossover was like Punisher and Batman. Maybe that was a good one. Like, no, man, they're always the worst ones. Like, it's not so much even having a crossover or not allowing these two things to coexist, because of course they could, right? Like, you could scientifically test the idea of remote viewing or psychic abilities or whatever. Where it becomes unscientific or where it becomes challenging is where, so one of the main highlights of a non-scientific theory or thought process is that the idea or the core belief never changes. You just keep giving reasons for why it failed.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
So if I say that the government is hiding alien bodies, and we all were able to go search every closet, every military installation in the United States, we could prove that the government isn't hiding alien bodies. Right. We could prove that. But do you think that the majority of the UFO community would take that as evidence?
Well, no, and this is a significant issue when it comes to conspiracy theories and things like this, because you can never produce enough evidence to disprove something for somebody. Yes. They'll always find a way to do the mental gymnastics. This is what QAnon is all about, right? This is the exact right. Now, I don't want to specifically, again, and I think it's important here that we don't necessarily. You can have different hypotheses, right? And it still be a scientific thought. I can have a hypothesis that there is an ultra-terrestrial civilization living on Earth. That can be a scientific thought, right? But I just can't necessarily, just because I can't prove it doesn't mean it's not testable. My test may fail, but it's still a hypothesis. It's still a reasonable hypothesis, no?
It depends on how you define a scientific theory, really. And there's different views of this, right? So in around the time that quantum mechanics became a big thing in the world of science, there were philosophers of science arguing about this. So there were people like, Carnap, or the logical positivists, or what they called themselves. And so what they believed was that science was inductive. So what that means is, like, science is trying to prove that there are physical laws out there that we're trying to find, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's wrong. I don't think there are physical laws out there. I mean, there are clearly ways that things work, right? But there is not some perfect, there's not some perfect equation out there that has some higher meaning or anything. Yeah.
Right.
What I believe is that the most effective way to do science is to try to disprove theories. So by me saying that, the theory of evolution is true, right? Or let's take a more simple one, right? The theory that, my water bottle is red, right? The best way to test that isn't for me to show you my red water bottle. It is for you to say your water bottle is green. No, that's not true. It's not green. It's not blue. It's not yellow. It's not white. It's not whatever. So it is red. So the theory has to be falsifiable, right? Or that's the way that I look at this. And that's the best way that, just like Squidding said at the beginning, which, by the way, Squidding, I remember you signed up for like a SkyHub newsletter or something. I distinctly remember being in a call with the SkyHub team going, someone said their first name was Rather, their middle name B, and their last name Squidding. And I don't know what's going on here. Like, I remember that happening, right? Anyways.
That's amazing.
That's our Rather.
It was good stuff. I enjoyed it a lot. The concept here really is that you are trying to, essentially, you put up a hypothesis and then you throw as much evidence against it as you can. And if the hypothesis withstands that, then it's a good hypothesis.
Right.
Right. That's the concept.
Right. But it's still not 100% proven. Just like, for example, I was listening to Brian Greene today, and he was talking about the second law of thermodynamics, and it's not a law. It's just usually overwhelmingly this happens, but it's not a law. Like, there are no true laws.
Yeah. It's not, there is no they're like every law is true until it's disproven.
Right.
Right. And so in my mind, a good skeptic, a good scientist is one who is ready to tear down all of their stuff. Right. Like your ideas are probably going to be wrong. I hope in 100 years, when we're all robots, that's that's the farthest woo I'm going to get. Probably. No, I really hope that, in 50 years, we'll be able to look back at the science we do today and say, we were wrong about loads of stuff.
Sure.
If we weren't wrong, that means that science has kind of stagnated. Right. Or,
Right.
and that's never
dogmatic. Good. Right.
Exactly. So to me, that's really and it's something that we try to be, ufology or kind of the UFO world is, I think, easy to poke fun at from a skeptic's perspective because, it's just the thing you do, right? If you want to be if you want to be able to eat at the skeptic's table, you got to make fun of UFO people, which I think is dumb. What you need to do is you need to be open to the fact that other people have different experiences than you do. You know what I mean? That's the main thing. Right. Just be humble. Just don't be like a jerk.
Don't be a dick.
Right.
It's exactly. Don't be a dick. Like, just don't be a dick. And like, sometimes if you follow me on Twitter, I'm totally a dick.
Yeah. We all have look. Here's the thing. We all have our moments with this. We're all humans. We all sort of get that moment where like, you know what? F this. I'm sending the tweet. I don't care who it pisses off. Right. And then you send the tweet. You're like, why did I do that? Why did I open myself for this punishment? But rather, what were you thinking? You had a thought.
Well, I was just wondering what you think about this, Chris, and that I think that it probably is. I agree with pretty much everything you're saying, but I think that there is a lot of value in ruminating on the metaphysical and these weird questions, because although they might not be testable, on the whole Wakanda theory, or these ideas might not be testable right now, thinking about them, it might drill down to something that you can test, and you maybe can learn some real tangible information.
I completely agree with that.
This, if we look back at the smartest people in history, if you look back at, say, Descartes or Immanuel Kant or Socrates or Plato or Aristotle or any of these, philosophers in the past, Plato is famous for writing about, or Aristotle, I should say, is famous for writing about Aristotelian forms, right? This idea of like, you have a chair, but that chair has some chairness that makes it like all of the other chairs. So there's like a physical world and a mental world, and they both coexist and whatever. The guy would have fit right in on Coast to Coast AM.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just, for me, there is absolute value in metaphysics. There is value in knowing those things. The problem that the UFO community has, and I think that this is true in, frankly, most communities, right, is of sort of citizen science. I think if you were going to be less charitable and more kind of, I guess, of a jerk skeptic, you would say that the kind of UFO community is one that is
entrenched in pseudoscience.
Entrenched in pseudoscience or conspiracy or whatever. And I don't think that that's necessarily always true. There are some areas, of course, that are, but there are also really smart people who have experiences. I mean, again, it's just a matter of you don't have to be, and I don't want to put smartness or intelligence out there as sort of a, as a requirement to be taken seriously, right? Just good people have experiences. People that are telling the truth have experiences. Mm-hmm, and right. So the real challenge is that, this, like, for example, one of the ideas that's out there is this idea of it being a trickster phenomena, right? That you try to measure it and then it changes whatever you saw, right, or whatever. That is just Descartes' demon. That's just Descartes' demon. And so that idea has already been worked out in the academic literature, right? It's already an idea that we've talked about since like the beginning of time. Mm-hmm. And so the issue is that, other philosophers came around, like Hume and Kant and these other people came around and figured out, okay, well, if that's the case, if Descartes' demon is true, which essentially is this idea that, if I measure something, Descartes' demon, for those that don't know what it is, essentially is this thought experiment that Descartes had, which was, if I'm looking at the world around me, how do I know that I'm not dreaming? How do I know that there isn't a demon changing all of my perceptions before they get to me. How do I know that that's true or not true?
Right.
And what Descartes said, I can't know that. And so famously he said, but the only thing I can know is that I must exist someplace to be thinking, right? So I think, therefore I am. Or more douchily, cogito ergo sum, right? So this idea of this, a trickster phenomena or something out there in the world around you changing your perceptions or whatever and making you see optical illusions or errors or whatever, that has a very long history. The problem is that has always sat very firmly in the world of metaphysics. And because ufology sort of has a short memory, right? Every generation of ufologists thinks that they're the first people to hear about everything, right? They're the first people to ever look at the stars. Like Bob Lazar was just discovered 2 years ago, right? Like, no, he's been around for decades, right? Like, we've known that story. All those things have happened. So it's this idea that, for me, the challenge, the issue is that there are parts of ufology or parts of this subject that are learning. There are parts that are getting smarter and are getting more capable. But for most people out there, because of the kind of preponderance of bad information or again, people kind of allowed to just people just giving theories or thoughts or whatever, because there's no peer review, because there's no criticality, it just keeps going back and back. It just keeps going over and over again, right? So in 10 years, when you guys are the old hats doing this, someone will ask you to be on their show and you'll be like, it's all Descartes' demon and this is crazy and there was this guy Cogswell talking about this back then, right? Because it just keeps happening.
Right.
Yeah, it repeats a lot. But don't you think, like, for example, I was literally just watching a video about on this today, the Boltzmann brain, right? And this is almost the exact same idea, but it's in quantum physics, right? This idea of the natural universe and a human brain having evolved to bring us here to this point in time is so unlikely, according to the second law of thermodynamics, that quantum philosophers came up with the Boltzmann brain idea, that it's much easier to imagine that we are potentially brains that were just came together in the vacuum of space, in the void, and everything is a projection of that. All thoughts and everything we see is pure illusion, right? And so you can look at simulation theory. But to your point, these are all rehashings of Descartes' demon. Doesn't mean they're new, but it doesn't mean they're wrong either.
No, that, for me, the quality of a theory or the quality of an explanation is how much it can actually explain. The idea that we're all brains in jars somewhere, experiencing the world around us or whatever, that has no explanatory power. Or like, what does that change for us?
Right.
Right. The example I'd give is, okay, we find out that we're all living in the Matrix. Does that change that your rent is due?
Nope.
Right.
No. So who cares?
Well, but if everybody found out at the same time that we were in the Matrix, I feel like everybody would be like, I ain't paying rent. Like, this is a simulation. I'm not paying rent.
We'd hope so, but no, I don't know, man. I mean, the issue, or I guess the problem is, and this is really the central, I think, challenge to the UFO subject is, if tomorrow aliens landed on the White House lawn, you know what I mean? And I don't know, came out arm in arm with, whatever, Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon, and they were like, we're real, we've been here, right? 80%.
Dude, that is a hilarious just thought.
Listen, all right.
Lou Elizondo holding hands with aliens coming out of the spaceship.
That would be dope.
It'd be hilarious.
80% of UFO people would think that is a false flag or it's not true. Or there's
it's true.
Aliens, right? So it's that's the one thing that I think is so interesting about this, though, is, if gray aliens came down and were like, we're real, you'd have people who believe in the Venusians being like, that's bullcrap. Right. You know what I mean? Like, that they're not, but the Venusians are real too. It would just keep going at it.
Zach, you've been pretty quiet. Do you have any thoughts, sir? I'd like to bring you in this conversation because I know you're a pretty deep thinker. So, what do you think so far about what's been said?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack.
Well, would you pay rent if we found out we were in the Matrix?
No.
Or would you break the line, bro?
I wouldn't pay rent. No, I mean, it's an interesting analogy. So it's like if we're in the Matrix, does it matter? Your rent is still due. That's not how my brain works. My brain immediately goes to, no, it fucking matters. I'm in the Matrix and I want out. I'm not Cypher. I don't want to get back in. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to go back in and live an illusion. I want to find out more about reality, and I want to know what's on the other fucking side, even if it means going and dancing in a rave in Zion or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, some underground orgy. But I mean, honestly, that underground orgy in part 2 seemed like a lot of fun.
It seems like a lot of fun. I mean,
although I have a feeling it wouldn't smell very good. That would be a
no. The robots were right. You can't take humans anywhere, man. The minute we get out, we're like, I got a great idea about what we can do. Like, no,
but the problem is with the trickster idea, and I always joke, like, anytime someone has something that can't be explained, I'm always just like, well, the phenomenon is a trickster. You know, it's like it's this joke that you can just always pull out. The problem with the trickster idea is that it's this ultimate unfalsifiable idea, as Chris pointed out, and there's nothing you can do in the face of that. It's like, I believe in God. Okay, cool. You believe in God. Like, prove it. You can't. Prove that there's no trickster. It's like, you can't. Right. So that element of things is always going to be involved in this field. But I mean, there's a lot of different issues to sort of disentangle in the ufological realm, and this is one, right?
Yeah, I think going to what Zach said there, right? The whole reason that Descartes' argument was kind of thrown away, or the reason Descartes was concerned about it, was the fact that there was no. If that's true, that you can't know, then the only thing you can know ever is that you exist someplace because you're thinking.
Right.
And so what philosophers later came around and said was, okay, maybe that's true, right? Maybe we're all in the Matrix, but we need to figure out how stuff works in the Matrix still, because that's where most people live and exist. So we need to find a way where we can make sense of the stuff happening around us. So we're just going to move past that.
But what if Carrie Ann Moss comes to you and lets you know, hey, things are not as they seem?
But still, it depends on. We've Zach and I have had this discussion actually many times in DMs about if
this is why I wanted to get the two of you guys together. And by the way, Mystery Goats, like Descartes Pro Skater 2 just came out. So I'm gonna go run to my local GameStop after this.
Gonna have to get that remake. In that game, you visit Area 51, which seems very disingenuous of Mick.
It really does. It really, really does.
There is a like, one of the things I think the UFO community assumes, and Zach I know feels this way in some ways, is that truth itself is a good, that knowing the truth is itself a good thing. And I actually think that is a view that a lot of skeptics believe too, that people having the truth is something that's good, and not having the truth that's harming you in some way. I'd actually argue almost the other way, right? All of those people in the Matrix, this sounds terrible because we all love the Matrix and we hope the Matrix 4 is good, but all of those people are taken care of. They are not hungry. They could turn off suffering maybe there, right? But is it better for those people to be woken up and then throw it into this terrible dystopian world of hunger and cold and everything else? Or is it kinder and better to let them live in the Matrix where things are great?
Doesn't it matter what the outcome is, right? Shouldn't it matter what is outside of the Matrix, or in any particular situation when you're having this conversation, if knowing the truth is good or not, right? So it's subjective. What's good for me may not be good for you. What's good for you may not be good for me.
All I'm saying is Chris seems really, really sympathetic to the machines, and I'm very very sus of Chris right now. He's literally
Zach.
like, he is the architect in the Matrix. He's like, but
Through
it would
this, yeah.
actually be
I'm
good.
just
I
waiting
don't see a problem here.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for him to hold a pen and be like, through this door.
Yeah,
you could,
no.
And through this door.
Well, it's actually, as someone said, right? It's just the allegory of the cave from Plato. Right.
Yeah. I was just
it
about to ask about that. This
Yeah,
is a $10 dono from Alpha Check, who said, great discussion as always. Would love to hear the discussion on possible explanation of the phenomenon from historical philosophers, Plato with the cave of allegory, images and forms, etc.
Plato also talked about Atlantis. He would do great on Coast to Coast AM.
He'd be
Oh my
awesome.
God, Plato.
The problem with Plato, it's so funny always. I was telling somebody this the other day. You guys know Pythagoras, like Pythagorean theorem. You guys remember that from like high school or whatever? So Pythagoras today is remembered for, coming up with the Pythagorean theorem. But Pythagoras actually was a cult leader for Apollo. And one of the things he told his followers was, you don't ever urinate facing towards the sun because that would anger Apollo.
Wow.
So a lot of this is this has nothing to do with what ancient philosophers would believe about the phenomenon. I'm just calling out Pythagoras for being an idiot. But it's very interesting. This concept of like what philosophers would think about this from the past, I really think that, again, this idea of there being some other world out there that we can't understand or explain, that was the predominant view of the world for the vast majority of human history. Mm-hmm. We are only today in the modern world really getting away from that. And even then, we're not really even effectively doing that.
So are you saying that far too many people are using science to explore philosophy rather and so the idea is that the justification for the scientific method is to understand our world and make it better or more useful or give us abilities we didn't have before, whereas trying to look beyond that or into the unfalsifiable is more of a role of philosophy, and science shouldn't be playing in that sandbox?
I'm saying that yes. I'm saying that there are some things that science can't explain, even in the sciences, right? Like Mike, you talked about the second law of thermodynamics, right? And that having something to do with, because of quantum physics, brains brains floating around, and that's the way we came together or whatever.
Right. It's the idea of the concept of entropy as a physical system. Yeah. Right. Property.
The second law of thermodynamics just says that engines get hot and lose energy. That's all the second law of thermodynamics is.
Yeah.
Right. So we're just like, a lot of what modern science does this, it gets too far ahead of itself, frankly, and starts to explain all kinds of stuff, right? There's this another field where this really happens a lot is in evolutionary biology, right? So, I have a bass guitar behind me, right? An evolutionary biologist might say that the reason I play bass guitar, the reason that there's instruments out there, is because it is good for the person doing it to spread their seed, and it's how they get chicks, and so then that's how their stuff propagates, and so it's evolutionarily biased towards playing guitars, right? It's advantageous.
I would say guitar as opposed to the bass, but go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say nobody cares about the bass player number one, right? Like I could die in a fire, no one would care. So the no, but like
unless of course you're Primus.
Bro, there's one bassist people care about. If you are, that is such a far leap from science says this thing happens to therefore we're all brains in jars. That's crazy, right? That's nuts. So what I would say is that there is no so there's the idea, or this idea is what's called reducibility, or reductionism. So like this sounds stupid, it's a very stupid one, but let's take the example of color, right? So this can is this is seltzer can, Polar Seltzer, sponsor my podcast, please. I love you desperately. Polar Seltzer, this can is yellow, right? It's
Okay.
at least it's yellow here, right?
Sure.
But this is aluminum. Is aluminum yellow?
No,
No.
not necessarily.
And so if I took an atom of aluminum out of this can, would it be yellow?
Probably not.
If I put 10 aluminums together, would they become yellow?
Nope.
No.
So at some point, the property of yellowness is happening to these atoms of aluminum. But it's something that is greater than what is possible to the parts. So the sum has properties that are different than the parts.
I feel like I'm in a high school science class.
I know
now.
it's ridiculous. I'm
amazing.
sorry, but
It's amazing. It's great. No, keep going.
But you guys get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
100%.
yellowness, it seems simple, right? Color is like a relatively simple property, but it is coming about from stuff that isn't yellow, right? It's color is happening from things that aren't color necessarily or don't have the property of color. The same thing can happen, say, with the mind, right? Do your brain cells have mind? No, probably not, right? Individual brain cells probably don't have a mind, but somehow the collection of brain cells that make up our brain does have a mind, does have consciousness, right? That is a irreducible quality that doesn't seem to make sense based on the individual pieces themselves.
Right.
And that is very odd. So that's kind of the view that I would take there, right? Is that there are things that science can't explain, even in the sciences. So why do we assume that science has to be the be-all, end-all answer for these other things?
Totally.
Well, would you argue though that we shouldn't look? It seems we can't know what we don't know, so it seems like science might not be able to address these themes now. Do you think they never can address them, and we shouldn't try?
I don't know. It's a good question. I have no idea. I think that we should try because,
you tried on some level with SkyHub, right?
Yes, we absolutely have. We have tried. And so that's the other difference here is there are reasons, I think, to try. There are reasons to look at these answers and things and try to find those solutions to these problems we're asking here. But at the same time, there is value outside of what science can tell us about these things. Another good example of this is if you have an abduction experience, or let's not even take an abduction experience. You have a nightmare, a vivid nightmare of you falling off a cliff face. And you wake up now with a phobia of heights. Is your phobia any less real because you never fell off a cliff?
Certainly not. Yeah.
No. So to me, there are ways to study these questions that are scientific that have nothing to do with whether or not the phenomena is real.
Right.
We can sidestep that question completely. And that's really what with SkyHub or with other kind of avenues we've tried to do. That's really what we have attempted, because to me, the reality or falsity of an event or of an experience or whatever, that's not up to me to decide. I'm not a detective. I wasn't there in the room with you. I have no idea whether or not you had your real experience or not. But I can tell that something traumatic happened to you. And so we should act as if, that's, what's the word? It's real. It's affecting you. The effect of it is real, even if the event itself maybe is not what you think.
Right. So you think science should be focused on helping the human as opposed to understanding the phenomenon?
I think science should stay in its lane. And I think that philosophy should stay in its lane in this case. And I think that people's experiences, the truth or reality of someone's experience is never going to be something that science can answer. So why try? Why even put it out there? Right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter how many videos Mick West debunks. because there's always going to be somebody who says, I had an experience.
Right.
So the most effective thing you can do is try to understand what happened to those people, or what the effects are on them.
Chris, what do you think of the fact that we have a government right now full of various officials that seem to be willing to use language like UAP or even UFO in some instances and talk about it as though there's a reality to it, and that we now have a UAP task force, there's now a UAP report. Like, how do you feel? You're obviously a very science-minded person. What do you think when all these officials come forward and they talk about this phenomenon? First of all, they use the word phenomenon. We just had the Secretary of the Air Force use that word with regards to this. They know what that signals to people when they use that language or they use these acronyms. What do you think about that? What do you think is going on there?
First off, I think about 50 years ago when the government was telling us that smoking cigarettes was healthy. Lobbying is extremely effective. And what we've seen over the last couple of years has been a very powerful lobbying effort to make the government take the question of UAP seriously as a defense issue seriously. That's
So
word salad.
Who's lobbying there? Who's the group or organization that's spearheading this lobbying?
I mean, Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo have had discussions with people at the Department of Defense, right? And
but
senators.
I mean, that's only really the last few years, right?
Right. So before that, it was Robert Bigelow's
totality
team.
of history, right?
Right.
Sure.
So that's the thing that people seem to forget, is that this effort has been going on since the 80s. Before there was Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, it was George Knapp and Linda Moulton Howe.
Right.
Right. This is the same effort. It's the same push. It's slightly different people, but
Does
it's the
it
same.
concern you that those efforts in lobbying, though, have resulted in this very real things being said by officials to the American people?
Well, Zach, do you not believe that there are unexplained things happening in our sky that the Navy can't explain?
I don't know. I don't know if there are. I suspect that there. I have no reason to not believe the pilots. I have no reason to not believe those people that they had experiences. But what I'll say is that if you take the historical approach to this subject that I try to, that the patterns and the people involved have been the same since the 1980s. So the idea that this is somehow new or going to become more impactful or more important, I think that a number of things came together to make that happen in the last couple of years that maybe wouldn't have happened before. Mm-hmm. But I believe that at the end of the day, what is going to happen is essentially that the government will decide if there is something to this, that they'll take care of it, number one, right? The public isn't going to be involved. The public is not going to be, are not going to be part of that discussion, first off. And secondly, I actually think that the most likely thing that comes from this will be, how did we allow this to happen to the government? Right? So my view is
lobbying effort.
My view is the following. What is more scary to you all? That aliens are here, and so the government taking this seriously is a real thing that should be taken seriously? Or, like the skeptics say, it's all wrong, it's all fake, and this has been a very effective push to delegitimize science.
I don't take either of those perspectives. I kind of stand
Yeah.
back. I stand
And that's
away.
probably the smart. Yeah.
Yeah. I stand way back on this. And the only thing I'm really interested in is getting as much information as possible about what's going on. I have no interest in either confirming or denying my previous beliefs or biases. I mean, I think this is and we've talked about this all the time on this show, how critical it is to disassociate your identity from your belief system or a desired outcome when it comes to UAP. So that's where I step back and go, I just want data. I want as much as possible, and I want to put as much of this on the table as possible so that we can sift through it together and figure out what's going on, because we all know what happens when you get too closely associate your identity with an outcome or a belief.
Well, a big part of this channel is, it's the reason why we started our Big Phone Home effort is we could sit here and have these discussions back and forth all day with each other, and we're never going to get anywhere with it because we're just not the authority on any level. But what we can do is we can start pointing up and sort of unifying these voices, these ideas, these opinions, and maybe start asking for more information to just clear the air. Because even though I've had my experience, I am okay, especially through talking with this show, I'm okay now. I'm at a point where if it turns out to be some sort of weather phenomenon that it's new to the human spectrum, if it turns out to be something just natural that is explainable and has very simple explanations behind it, I'm okay with that. I'm also okay with if this turns out to be just a cover story for new physics discovered on a private industry scale. I'm down with that too. Like, that in itself is a really fun, fantastic story to dive into, because then we can have Chris Cogswell on and have him explain to idiots like me how this new technology works. Like, this is still a fun story either way you slice it. And I think that's sort of the sweet spot that we found here, is that we don't base our complete identity on this belief system, even though myself, especially out of this crew, I think have had the most significant experience out of us. And even me, I have to just step back and allow that thought process to occur.
So I think you guys are 100% correct in trying to keep your personalities, I guess, or sort of egos out of it. Right? That's the 100% correct approach. The other thing I think you guys are completely correct about is the only way that there will be answers on this is to not get them from other people, is to get them for yourself. And so events where you're calling your congressperson or frankly, SkyHub, it's why I joined SkyHub, because the idea was you yourself are getting those answers. You're getting that data. It's not being massaged by someone trying to get, money out of your pocket or whatever. So that is a very, I think, important part to this. The historical view of this that I see is the government. This sort of started in the 50s and 60s with the government believing, frankly, that the sort of psychic phenomena that was being pushed by Scientology were true, or potentially true and useful. Right. And so the government setting up a system to study remote viewing, and then that closing up shop when the paper was attacked by other parapsychologists. So this, and then that team kind of continuing, right? The Men Who Stare at Goats and, John Alexander's kind of work with, warrior monks and things. And then the Skinwalker Ranch story where, Bigelow, who'd, again, had been involved in this from before his name was even a thing in the UFO circles, pushing this sort of research and things. I don't know if those people necessarily... I think sometimes the view that I have comes across as if those people have a very, like they're trying to trick the government or something. Right. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I I don't think they're trying to trick the government. I think they really believe these things. But I'll say the government is made up of people,
Right.
just regular people. So is it crazy to think that a government worker in a country where a huge proportion of the country is religious, if not very spiritual in a way, would believe that maybe there are UAP out there and then take it seriously? I don't think that's that crazy to believe. I guess I don't think it has as much weight as other people think. The government makes task force all the time. If the government, I'm the kind of person who I don't know if I would trust what the government tells me anyways. So I don't care that there's a UAP task force, right? Because like, who cares? They had one before in the 60s, right? Like they've done this before.
There's a lot going on here. But the thing that I would say is, like, it's often said that the government is just made up of people. I take slight issue with that. It's not. Yes, it is. It's just people, just like you and me, right? But they have a responsibility. When they're talking about things in certain ways. So like, if a government representative comes out and says, don't wear masks, it's like, that's a big deal, right? If a government representative says something that is complete horseshit, that's a big deal. If a government representative comes out and uses language and says the UAP phenomenon is real, that's a big deal. Yes, they are people just like you and me. But I do feel that they do have a responsibility to be a little bit more and to really think before they say things.
But Zach, they changed from using UFO to UAP, I think, due to those reasons you were saying, because they don't want to have the stigma and stuff. And I guess
we all know, that stigma exists in both acronyms, right? It's not.
It was an attempt.
We've just moved the acronym.
But if there are things that are unexplained in the sky that they don't know what it is, what are we to call that? What could we call that wouldn't have that same stigma?
Well,
there's nothing we could call it. And what I would say is that any version of this where you're using a generalized term to talk about any number of things that could be in the sky, you are then, by extension, you're going into that realm that you say that you don't want to go into, which is non-terrestrial entities or non-terrestrial craft or what have you. There's no acronym you can use that's general, talking about all things that could possibly be in the sky, that isn't going to insinuate that at this point. You can try to change it from UFO to UAP, but you're not going to succeed. And my point is that by using this new language of UAP, they are actually fanning the flames here. And I actually think that's really important, because they're not distinguishing and they're not saying it's glitches and drones. They're not compartmentalizing the stuff here. They're saying it's UAP. Could be any number of things in this rainbow of possibilities. And I'm saying that that's actually deeply irresponsible. And that's a big piece of like what has my mind personally going on this entire topic. Why are officials playing with fire here in a time when people are super vulnerable to being
misled,
convinced of damn near anything, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic, right?
Sure,
like,
sure. Right, but why are people in that state of being misled? Because the government has been doing exactly what you're talking about for 50 years.
Well, I would argue
since the end of World War II. It's not, it's again, the Surgeon General 50 years ago said that smoking cigarettes was healthy and good for you.
Yeah.
The government believes crazy crap all the time. The government says dumb things all the time. So that, so the idea that there is, and again, we know what the pedigree of this information has been, right? There are airmen and airwomen and service members who have reported seeing sightings, and those should be investigated fully and seriously, right? Totally. Because they could be a drone from China or an alien ship or whatever, right? Those should be investigated. But that is not that is something that could happen silently, right?
Mhm.
That could happen in the behind the scenes. That is something that probably has been being investigated behind the scenes silently. We would be comically, we would just be bad at war if we were doing that. If we weren't taking advantage of those sorts of questions.
We're comically bad at war if we couldn't solve 143 out of 144 cases in which we know that there was sensor data available, dozens of sensor platforms, right? The report asks us to pretend that we did not have access or did not have recorded data from dozens of sensor platforms, and none of this helped us elucidate anything about any of this. And in 18 specific instances, we ruled out foreign and we ruled out ours. It's like,
so yeah.
This stuff is,
would you rather they just not tell us about those cases then? Like I don't get what your alternative you're proposing necessarily is.
Well, I guess I'm actually coming at this more from the skeptical point of view. It's like, so if you come at this from the skeptical point of view, it's like all of this is sort of BS that's been perpetuated by lobbyists. It's like, okay, fine, but look at what is actually happening here, because this can't really just be explained 100% just by the history of Bigelow and the history of machinations of lobbyists. I'm sorry, it doesn't really wash. If you actually go through and you read what's being said and you look at what these officials are saying, for me, it doesn't wash. The skeptical argument doesn't wash for me because
I'm not.
They know what it means to use the language UAP. They know the stigma that carries, right?
So what my argument would be is that I think what the government is doing is completely separate for the most part from what UFO world is doing or what UFO media is doing.
Sure.
I don't think that To the Stars Academy coming out and saying, we did this, we got Congress to move on this. I don't know if that is necessarily, I'm not sure how much of that happened because of UFO world or whatever versus a Chris Mellon's influence. Right now, Chris Mellon is part of TTSA, of course. But what I'm saying is that I think we have to separate what is happening and what the military views this as and what we are told to believe about it by UFO media. Because I agree with you.
Absolutely.
I think that there is clearly something, again, I think that the government clearly has been moved into action to do this, but I'm not sure that the best sources of information for that are UFO figures whose entire career is based off of making them seem more important than they have been, right? Or more effective than they have been. I mean, we still talk about people who, again, are infamous for having failed at finding evidence of UFOs. But we still talk about them in this field as if they are bastions of information and greatness, Right. Frankly, like Skyhub failed. You guys shouldn't have me on the damn show. Right? Like my thing didn't work, dude. Like, it didn't happen. Like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
But so that's I think the thing that's so interesting or frustrating about this field is that, when I first got into this field, my drumbeat has always been get rid of the same old people who have failed to get evidence of UFOs for you for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm leaving the field, right? Of my own volition, of course. And those people who have failed for now 80 years are still around. Right? And that's what happens with UFO world. Is that
well, I was going to say, but we have this UAP task force where it is, I think, revolutionary time now is that we don't have to listen to the people in the UFO community. We have the government completely changing their course in the last couple of years and saying that.
But they haven't. They haven't changed their course. This is exactly what they were saying during Blue Book and what they've said historically.
In Blue Book, they were trying to dismiss it all, saying that
at the end of Blue Book, they tried to dismiss it all, which is what they tried to do with the task force report.
Yeah.
You're
It's the
saying
same
this
thing,
is,
again
you're
and again
saying
and
this is
again.
headed. You're saying this is the UAPTF task force is. We're still in the middle of this, and it's not closed like Blue Book, and it's not leading.
No,
You're saying it's all
exactly.
leading in the same direction as Blue Book did.
Listen, I'm not in the prediction business, right? I don't know what'll happen with the task force. All I am saying is that, again, the UFO field thinks that they are the first people to look at the stars. Every generation thinks they're the first ones, right? We're the first generation to have the government come out and say there's real aliens out there. We're the first ones to have, military people coming out there. One of the first people I met at a MUFON event when I was in MUFON was an airman, was a pilot who saw it, an alien in the 1970s. Or not an alien, but a UFO, right? UAP, whatever. I'm mixing things up now, guys. There have been military witnesses the entire time, right? Military witnesses, most of MUFON are former military people. So how can you say that these are new? The military witnesses are now a new phenomena.
I just think I'm going to say it's the quality of the witness. The expertise and the professionalism of the two witnesses.
But that's a media thing, right? That's just good. That's good media and lobbying, right? That's all that is.
Right.
So, and I agree with you. The lobbying effort has been very, very effective, but at the same time, and this is the real problem here, right? So again, I'm on my soapbox here, and I'm sorry. The one thing the field never does is throw away bad actors or bad views, right? Corey Goode and David Wilcock will keep milking the conference circuit until the day they die,
right?
Or until they're beamed up. You know,
I think
I don't know if you guys.
I think that our subsection of the ufological field has thrown out Corey Goode and
we think
David
about
Wilcock,
that, but
right?
Bob Lazar came back.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying that I see a bifurcation in the community. I see that the people that are interested in the way that we're interested in the UCR audience and whatever. I don't think Luis gets a lot of people that come in and defend David Wilcock and Corey Goode. I don't.
Well, of course
right?
not, right?
I think that there's different sections. I think
the community's getting a little more sophisticated when it comes to who they believe and what information they go forward with. It's a very difficult. I mean, look, we just had 2 guests on Monday, 3 guests that had some very wild ideas, and it was difficult for one of us to sit here and listen to those wild ideas and just listen.
Yeah.
Listening is very difficult in this, and then being able to take some of those ideas, question them as hard as we can in the time that we have, and try to make sense of it, but never once tell anybody you should follow this person. This guy's got it right. He knows 100% what's going on, because that's dangerous. We just don't know. The answer is so ambiguous. But here's how I know the conversation is killing it. We've blown through 2 resets on this show. We've got Artemis Prime to read our poll results, which, by the way, the poll, we haven't even gotten to this part of the discussion, which is why I wanted you guys on. And the poll was, do you watch when Tucker Carlson covers the UAP UFO topic? And we've got 4 really great options here. So we're going to have her come on and read the results and then maybe get to that part of the conversation. But I'm loving this. This is phenomenal.
This too, and I want to stick on this conversation we're already having. Damn it.
I know. Okay, but let's not to say we should leave this conversation. We can come back to it. And if we don't get to the Tucker Carlson one, fine. This conversation is totally killing it. But we do have to reset. So just for the people who are just tuning in, catching up to the show, Michael, please remind who we have on the show today.
Absolutely. So for those of you just joining us, we've got Zac Cichy. He is the creator of Project Human FM. We've also got Chris Cogswell here today from the Mad Scientist podcast. He's a PhD in chemical engineering with a focus on nanomaterials. Thank you, gentlemen, both so much. And what we've been really digging into today is how we view this UAP or UFO phenomenon and whether or not science should be and how science should be involved in the process. So we're going to get back to that. We've got some amazing other conversations we're going to get to here in just a second, but I want to bring Artemis Prime in to give us our poll results. And if you haven't clicked the subscribe button, if you haven't hit the bell, make sure you do so, because we've got the Big Phone Home 2 coming up, where we're demanding that the congressional leaders and our government hold hearings on the UAP phenomenon so that we can get as many facts as possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Artemis for our poll results.
Hey guys. Yeah, that was a good poll result, I think. So the question today was, do you watch when Tucker Carlson covers the UAP UFO topic? So the results are 33% said, yes, I don't miss one. 29% said, no, that man disgusts me. 15% said, I do. I don't admit it though. And 22% said, I'm an addict, just give me more.
Okay. All right. Those are interesting poll results. So the winner was yes.
Was yes.
Or no, sorry, 100% yes. Yes. That was the
yes, winner. Don't miss
okay.
one. Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. Artemis, you have a show coming up tonight with Priscilla, right? Okay. Well, guys, when you're done watching this, go check out Artemis Prime. Put the link in the chat so you guys can go check it out. And thank you for coming on and sharing the poll with us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nervous,
good
but
luck
also
with
excited.
Show. Yeah. Have fun. What are you ladies talking about tonight?
Just like what's new in UFO, and also maybe some paranormal stuff, which is kind of cool. Yeah. Nothing like too out there, but just, kind of like dipping in, see what's going on, be open-minded,
Awesome.
And also because we're girls and in the topic, so trying to advocate for that as well. Have a drink, do a ladies thing, maybe have some surprise guests on there, just popping in, just for fun.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I'll be watching.
Be fun. Okay, sounds good.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Speaking of ladies, Michael, we do have another lady waiting to join the discussion.
We have UFO Jane joining us, who is a Texas UFO researcher, aka UFO Jane has documented over 1,000 UFO cases over the years in her interviews with UFO experts and others on her YouTube channel, The Weird UFO Show. It's always a pleasure to see you, Jane. Welcome.
I'm sorry to crash the party. This is a really good conversation. I'm deeply into it. So.
No, yeah, good. Well, now you can share your thoughts on it. No, I love it. So real quick, just want to say thank you to Alex Credit for the $4.99 donation. Thanks for the reset and the conversation. Always stoked to be here with you all. We are stoked to have you, my good sir. And then we had a super sticker. Oh, there it is from Akashi Chris. $5 super sticker. Thank you so much, you guys. Again, every dollar you guys spend on the show goes to making sure that we're here 5 days a week for you guys. So always a pleasure to see some dollars in the super chat. And if you haven't seen, we do have a Patreon, so check out the Patreon. But we're going to skip the Patreon commercial for this conversation because it's too damn good. Okay, so where did we leave off? Where do we want to continue with this conversation?
Well, I mean, if I could real quick, I just had one thing I wanted to mention because Chris has brought up this a few times. People think they're the first to hear of, Bob Lazar or Chris Bell. And when somebody new comes into the conversation, it's like everything starts over again. And there's all these cycles and history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes and this sort of thing. And I think he's right. And that's important. I also want to mention that, you use the analogy, people have always been looking up at the stars, but, over time, through the centuries, through science, we've come to understand, what stars are and that we're not the center of the universe. And so these have had profound influences on how we live our everyday lives here on Earth. And it was because of science that, we don't believe in as much superstition as we used to. And all of these sorts of things change and we've modernized our world and we've come so far. So, my argument against this idea that, you're not the first and you're not gonna be the last and everybody comes in and fails. I almost wonder if you're a little bit frustrated or maybe even bitter.
So that's the thing though. Not everyone does fail. The difference is that the really good people out there, or the people really doing hard work and getting this sort of information out there, tend to be people we don't always hear a whole lot about. So an example of this I'll give, and so what ends up happening, I think, is that it's not that the field doesn't learn, because there's a core of people who are learning and who are gathering data and getting this up to speed, right? And I would argue you guys are some of those people, right? You're looking at this story and viewing it historically and picking and choosing things that you think are true or maybe not or whatever. So a good example of this I always give is, you guys all know the Mothman story, right?
Yeah.
I don't. The Mothman story?
Mothman Prophecy. So you didn't see that Richard Gere movie?
No.
Right. It's a pretty famous case of, it's actually probably the first.
I've seen
case,
The Fly.
It's probably the Mothman Prophecies is probably one of the first cases of the Men in Black appearing in UFO lore. And the figure was this guy named Indrid Cold, right? And the person that Cold abducted was Woodrow Derenberger. Woody's abduction event, how do you think the aliens got him into the ship?
I'll probably drug him. Like I don't know.
You think he was drugged? Mike,
not like drug him with like a needle. I mean, like he was like dragged, with feet, sort of. So
his feet were scraped. Yeah.
Right.
Mike?
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
Okay, squidding. I'm not asking you about the movie. I'm asking you, how do you think it happened? In your head, how do you think it happened?
I think you'd go willingly.
He went willingly. Jane?
I don't know. I just keep imagining him getting beamed up in a big blue light.
Right? Beamed up in the blue light. That is the common motif that we hear a lot of the time. Right? We even hear that with Betty and Barney Hill. Woody Derenberger's ship, the door literally slammed open like an old Ford. Okay, the metal door fell and clanged on the ground.
Right.
And then the aliens came and brought him in, and he looked at, like, it was like a Fallout, like an alien ship from the Fallout video game series.
Right.
Same thing is true with Betty and Barney Hill, by the way. Right? Barney was dragged. His shoes were scuffed because the aliens literally, like, drug him into the ship. Right? So the motifs of UFO abduction, or what these things look like, what these events look like, they change with society and with media. So our view today of what an alien abduction looks like is far more technologically advanced than what it would have looked like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So
it used to be angels and demons, right?
Well, it used to be angels and demons, or witches, right? And one of the things I'm the most interested in is, frankly, the shift from demonology from science to a non-science, right? That's one of the areas that I find most fascinating. All of the same motifs in many abductions happen in witchcraft cases as well. So, and some people might think, well, that's evidence of ancient aliens or what have you, right? That these things are that way. Me as a skeptic would look at it more that this is an interesting case of society changing our myths and things like that. But it's still I think the fact that these stories change, or the way that they change, is interesting. But there are people out there picking apart the parts that remain the same as well. That's what I think we should be looking for.
Interesting.
Right? What is staying the same about these things? What is the core that's not changing? Right? Is there any evidence there that's of interest? Or, it's like if you were doing
what do you think? Is there anything you notice through in ufology that's like, what stays the same from what you've studied?
Well, there always seems to be a family connection, right? There always, if it happens to one member of the family, it seems to happen to other members of the family. It seems to happen to people. It seems to tend to start in childhood, if it starts at all. Right? Most people aren't. It seems like, at least, that it doesn't happen later on. But really, other than those sort of really two things, I think it's a question that, again, you need to. One of the biggest failings, I think, of the UFO subject is that we actually don't have a good data set of case reports. You know, MUFON's been collecting cases, but MUFON cases, if you are a UFO investigator for MUFON in Georgia, let's say, I don't know if these states are real or whatever. Let's take Massachusetts, for example. There's one investigator in Massachusetts. He's very good. Everything that he gets, they actually did a study in MUFON, within MUFON itself, where they looked at what was the percentage of cases that were called unknowns, right? Real cases of abduction or sightings or whatever. In some states, that percentage is as high as 50% of all cases reported.
Wow.
There's no way that's real.
Yeah. There's no
In other
way.
states, it's 10% or less. So all of the case reports we're getting in are coming from people. So that's a problem. That's a problem.
Because you're saying that the consistency between investigations is inadequate.
Between investigators as well.
Right.
There's no standard.
Well, if you talk to people who have really been doing this for a long time, right? Chris Rutkowski, or even, you know, old folks at MUFON or whatever, right? People that have really been doing this for a long time. If you talk to them and ask, well, so what is the what's the word? What is, you know, what is the best way to study this? A lot of them will tell you that the best way is to find one investigator who's taken lots of cases and understand their biases, because that's the only way you're going to be able to look through those. Right? Yeah. So that's the best way.
Why are you laughing, Jane?
I have some biases. No, you're totally right, Chris. Like, I have actually, you know, my own little like personal database that I've not, you know, made public, that I'm kind of working on, you know, over the years. And people always ask me, oh, like, what's that favorite case or that most amazing case? And I always have the most boring answer, which is like, they all blur together to me at this point, and it's more just like patterns. Yes. So it's like the triangles, you know, those are definitely like the most persistent phenomenon. The gray alien encounters definitely are a consistent report, but it's just like what you're saying, Chris, where all the evidence is metaphysical. So you just hit a wall with science. I think I totally agree with you there, Chris. Like, so many things, and Zach too, that you guys were saying, even though I don't know if I'd call myself a believer. I'm pretty open-minded and I lean in that direction. But just so many things that you guys are saying, that's really more my day-to-day, which is you really are trying to disprove it. You know, when I get a UFO video or photo, you're just everything you can do to disprove that it's an alien. And like, when you can't, that's when, you know, you get the goosebumps. Yeah. You know, you found something.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and a good example of someone who did not examine their own biases, in my opinion, and this is just, you know, this is like a recent thing that's kind of come up in UFO Twitter or whatever, is David Jacobs. I don't know if anyone here has read The Threat or any of his books or whatever.
I'm just now hearing of David Jacobs for the first time.
So, you know,
Really?
David Jacobs was not trained in any of the things that he was doing, and he was doing hypnotic regression on a huge subset of people.
And then sold those cases to Bigelow.
There's a lot of problems, right? I don't want to get into all of the problems. I want to focus on just like a couple of the problems. Like he was getting himself involved in situations where a woman would claim that, she had a sexual encounter with an alien hybrid. And then he was asking her for things like, hey, can you send me your underwear? While under hypnotic regression. And it's like, so, and it's sort of like and there are people who defend this and stuff, and it's like, there's no defense of that. But it's part of the whole problem, right? Because that's part of the original reason MUFON broke apart, was because it came out that they were selling abductees case reports to Bigelow.
Wait. I'm sorry to interrupt, Chris. I just noticed within so many years ago, the abduction reports just started disappearing from MUFON, and they didn't really know why.
They totally know why. right? MUFON Insiders
I
will
knew
tell
that,
you.
I knew there was stories about Bigelow, but I didn't know that it was like kind of
100%
common
proven.
knowledge that it was specifically the abduction report.
No, completely proven and sold to sold to Bigelow's team when they were doing Skinwalker Ranch.
But Chris, can I ask you, when you say sold, and just
That
goes
was
back
back
to
then.
UFO Jane's point, so
I'm
they
talking
were
about more recently.
they were sold.
Well, so
like,
here's
as
okay.
in-
So look, here's the dirty thing that no one wants to tell you about ufology. All of it, a lot of it, not all of it, right? You guys are an example away from this, I would say, generally. Although your commercials are very good, but I'm not going to fault you for that. A lot of ufology is built on a pipeline where good cases are taken, they are commercialized, and then sold to the A&E network, History Channel, for documentaries, for whatever. Yeah.
right.
And for a time, those reports were being sold to Bigelow and his team.
And then
At
he was
base.
turning around and selling them to production companies.
No, he wasn't selling them. He was
Okay.
keeping them.
Okay.
So,
For his
but so here's the challenge then. Yeah. Okay, so we know that Elizondo worked at Skinwalker Ranch with Bigelow, where he was part of that team. So was he part of buying the hypnotic regression cases? Was he there when that happened? And then suddenly your whole deck of cards of UFO heroes falls apart. That is why there is apologia for this, right? That's why it happens. So, and not again, Elizondo could very well have had nothing to do with it, right? We have no reason to think he had anything to do with it. But again, another one of those things that I've kind of kept harping on about, and I think it's what's made me so unpopular in UFO world generally, is this concept of fruit of the poison tree, right? So TTSA, one of the ones that I really pushed on this about was the Bob Lazar book that TTSA published. TTSA then discovers a piece of alien material. Yeah, let's say they do. And then they bring it to science. And then scientists Google TTSA and realize, oh my God, you guys sold this crazy guy's book. Do you think that's going to prove it to anybody?
No.
No. Right? And it's similar to frankly, the stuff with Tucker Carlson, right?
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson, whether again you're liberal or conservative, has a very specific base of people who watch him. For the same reason I would not go on Rachel Maddow to try to convince the world of UFOs, I wouldn't go on Tucker Carlson. Because it's going to get a large portion of the population to say, screw you, I don't believe anything that guy says or that lady says.
Right.
I also, for the record, would not go on Wolf Blitzer. I hate him.
But that's more of a personal. That's more of a personal bias.
But so that's the problem that happens. Yeah, is that we end up with this challenge, and it's part of, again, me and Zach. I feel like we have this argument with each other constantly, which is, what are you enabling in times? Yeah. What are you? And again, someone in the chat is saying, well, what if Lazar is real? Whatever. It doesn't matter. Lazar is implicated in selling poison to someone who murdered someone through his company, right? Like Lazar is not a good. It doesn't matter what you believe about Lazar's thing. Lazar is not a good witness.
Right.
He's not a good witness anymore. His story has gone away.
Chris, I've gotten myself in trouble on this channel as well. I always ask myself, because Bob Lazar, the definition, he was a pimp for a while of his life, and in my mind, I try to think of myself as, okay, if I was going to choose that as a job, right, as a way to make money, like. And my mother asked me, so what are you doing? What are you doing for work? Like, I would never, ever, ever choose that line of work, because I know I could not have that conversation with my mother, because I was raised better than to be a pimp. And so then when I look at that and I say, wow, man, what is the, and we've talked to a couple of psychiatrists about this, like, what is the mental, where are you at mentally for you to say to yourself, yeah, I think I'm going to open a brothel and be a pimp, Yeah, I'm going to hire the ladies.
After you reverse engineered.
Right. Like that's, and it's
now,
like,
No, but wait. Granted, after you've reverse engineered UFOs and no one believed you, your mental state might not be great. The problem with Lazar is that there's just too many problems. I mean, do you want to really go down the damn list? Do you?
I don't.
Do you
Do
want
we
to talk
really
about
want to
the fact
spend
that
30
John
minutes talking about Lazar?
No.
Really quickly, John Lear was talking about this story 2 years prior to Lazar ever coming forward. John Lear was talking about someone that he knew who worked at Area 51, reverse engineering these craft. There are a lot of problems. The damn his education background, the documents aren't there. The only professor he was able to name was one from a community college. And then people say things like, well, he was asked to drink this glass of pine stuff, so his memory is all fuzzy. It's like, well, that's the trickster at work.
Right. No, well, it is.
I think
from what do you got, rather? Hold on, wait. What do you got, rather?
Well, I think, just because that there's controversial people that are attracted to this very weird phenomenon doesn't mean that there's no there. It could just mean that there's this really weird thing that's happening.
That's a great point.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite of the appeal to authority bias. You're literally doing 100%. That's an opposite bias.
But it's exactly those types of people that you would expect the government to maybe expect not to ever, make a dent in this or ever be, believed. So yeah, I don't think anything. I always felt that even before I knew more that Lazar had probably a shadowy kind of strange history. I mean, look where he's at. He is that type of character. Yeah. So I don't think that takes really, I think almost it just makes it more believable to me in a lot of the ways, just how different he is, I guess would be the nicest way to put it.
Because a straight laced dude in Area 51 doesn't turn over any information, right?
Exactly, doesn't go rogue.
Right.
It's only somebody like this that is going to come out about it.
So I think regardless. Sorry, Zac, I just want to say one thing. Go ahead.
This is fun, you guys.
For me, I think the important part of it is a matter of. Oh my God! Now I wanted to say something and cut you off, Zac, and now I'm having a brain fart. I'm like, what did I want to say? Good. The trickster strikes again. It's a matter of
That's more or less what I was gonna say.
It's a matter of pragmatism. Yeah, where if I wanted to say that my store was robbed by somebody and I wanted to bring it out to the public that my store was robbed, who would I ask to be a witness for me? Who would I want on my side of the bench? It's not even about whether or not they're telling the truth or not, right? Because again, like you're saying, Mike, completely true, right? We are making assumptions about, we're shaming sex work in a way by being like he was a pimp or whatever. Like all of that is not, you can be a pimp and still be truthful. Yeah, yes, that's completely true. The issue is, who are you going to convince pragmatically with the testimony of someone who has a shadowy past like this?
Right.
That is what I mean by fruit of the poison tree. That it really matters who you associate with in this field. It really matters, because if this is serious, if this is real, if all of the people claiming that they have been injured by this phenomena are telling the truth, then the worst thing you can do, if you are a witness or somebody who has witness testimony to go forward with, is to then create plausible deniability for that evidence by deciding to make $100 in a conference.
Right.
I mean, that's exactly why George Knapp, gave over the New York Times story to Leslie King and Ralph Blumenthal, because it does matter who it comes from. Mm-hmm. And I think that, the UAP task force is a good source, in my opinion. And
that's it?
Well, yeah.
But how was anybody going to do? But the very whole first hour of this was talking about how this phenomenon is bigger than any scientist or is bigger than anybody's briefing, right? Like if aliens landed on the lawn tomorrow, we still really wouldn't know anything. We'd still be asking the same questions, right? Just more seriously. So, I mean, who is that? the whole first hour is kind of like how that witness doesn't exist, right? So are we looking for something that's impossible? Because it like we're saying, if the other pattern of all of these UFO sightings is that, and other, I guess, so metaphysical topics, is the cover-up.
Have you read Cheryl Costa? Anyone on the call?
Familiar with her.
I know who she is, but I've not read her book.
You should read Cheryl Costa, because Cheryl Costa has the right idea. And her idea is essentially, we don't look for individual cases anymore, because individual cases can always be questioned. What you look for are statistics. And that's exactly what Skyhub was trying to do too.
Right.
So what you're looking for are not individual cases that, okay, well, that person was dreaming or that person was whatever, right? What you look for is there are commonalities in this data that cannot be explained by just people. Back when Jan Allen Hynek was working on this, or even previous people, kind of the Mothman example is a really good one here. Actually, back during the Mothman days, one of the cases that kept coming up and up was an alien with the same name appearing to people across the country in the United States. That was one of the reported cases that kept happening. That is a lot harder to fake, especially back in the 70s when this was going on in the 60s.
Right.
So the answer to me is data. It is not necessarily in individual reports, although those are valuable. They're valuable sources of data, of course, right? And those people should be respected and taken to be seriously. Yes, Apple, APOL, 100%, right? That was the name of the alien that kept appearing to people. So I think that really the answer is going to be data. It's going to be looking at this. What I meant before was not that science cannot be applied to this. Is that science should know what its limits are. That's more what I meant. So science, I think, is still going to help answer these questions. I just don't think science isn't going to change anyone's beliefs. Because that's not what science does.
Science does not have open access to what's behind classified walls, which is, again, probably the central issue here, right? Because we have officials, we have pilots, we have ex-military people claiming all sorts of things, and we don't have that data, and that's the dance and the game that we are playing, right?
Hashtag the big phone home too. Let's try. Let's try and get more data. That's the whole point. Is let's ask our representatives to see if we can try and finagle some more. Not even so much new data, but it would be nice just to get corroborating data with the data that we have. That would be enough.
I would even take it. I don't know if you'd agree with this, but the way that I would almost frame it is, hey guys, if there's nothing to this, could you please stop?
Right.
Because what you're currently doing is extremely irresponsible. Do you realize that every single time you drop the acronym UAP or you insinuate that there might be something to the phenomenon, that you are actually triggering this whole subsection of the population? Maybe you don't really care. Maybe you don't think it's that big a deal, but you are very much screwing with these people's mental health, and it's a problem. Can you stop doing that? If there's something to it, then by all means keep going, but please give us something.
We'll see.
Because we need something of substance here.
You've talked about this in the past, Zach, the totality of things, right?
Totally.
Like this big, when you step back and you see this big picture, like why would I understand the lobbying aspects of this, but why would a senator very comfortable in his seat even bring this up? Like, what's the motivation? What's the impetus for him to say these absolutely unprovable things? But they add this phenomena aspect to it. And it also, like, this question, this $5 question kind of also leads into this, really wish Bill Nelson would tell us what his briefing with the UAPTF was about. Like, here we have the head of NASA, a former astronaut, using the acronym UAP, saying that he's been briefed as a senator and has listened to these pilots and that he believes these pilots' testimonies when they come across his desk. What's the motivation? What's the impetus? I mean, are we just trying to get more funding for NASA? Is that what's happening there?
Man. And okay, go on. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, I will say I have several videos. I would say it's technically several, 3 or more, right? Predicting that NASA has been prepping for disclosure for a while. So in my opinion, they've been preparing for this, ready for it. You know, I remember in one press conference, somebody saying the theory. And look, the other part of disclosure, right? So it's not just UFOs, UAP, whatever you want to call them. It's also just the idea of there being extraterrestrial life, like in our universe, in our solar system. So NASA will play a very important role with that, with like the announcements that will probably come, even if it's just like microbial life, right? It's a paradigm shift, you know, as we say. And I think NASA's, you know, our public space program, and I can't think of a more important frontier that would be extremely classified. So yes, I would suspect that, I would hope that there's some folks at NASA that have been in the loop this whole time, and astronauts have shared UFOs they've seen in space and talked about it. So I think it's happening out there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I said on Twitter, you know, about NASA is like, why is NASA being briefed on something that they absolutely have more information about than the UAPTF possibly could have? You know, I mean, this is the kind of thing I get into, like, all of this stuff breaks my brain, logically speaking. It's like the UAPTF, on the basis of the report that we got, did not have great access to data. They just didn't.
But it was a preliminary report, though, right?
We don't really know that yet. We don't really have all those.
Well, it was only 7. It was 7 years of Navy reports.
Yeah,
that's a very limited data set, right? So like NASA didn't influence the report, the CIA didn't influence the report. So if you look at where are all the UFO reports, that those agencies and groups probably were not part of this government UAP preliminary report.
And again, the UAP task force report is coming from similar to the Bigelow work on Skinwalker, coming at the behest of the Congress. So it's not coming from the military. It's not coming from NASA. It's not coming from, right, the internal intelligence community. It's coming from at the behest of elected officials who, again, ask for things all the time. So, you know, I think the real, you know, Zach, I mean, you know, I agree with you on this, that it doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense to think that NASA doesn't have information already if there is any to gather. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, say with Skyhub, right? The Skyhub idea is, the science behind Skyhub was essentially using stuff that NASA was doing in the 50s and 60s to track satellites. So, you know, those cameras are there already. The government has those cameras out there. So if there is stuff there, they've already captured it, likely. The problem is, or the challenge is that, again, it's sort of, I think, a matter of, I guess, are you looking for something specific or not? Yeah, because there's probably anomalies in the sky all the time that we just don't realize.
Yeah, I think they filter them out without even thinking about it.
Exactly. You know, they called them, what was it, when NASA put some astronauts saw, you know, the image of the Tic Tac or whatever, or there was something else that they saw. I don't think it was the Tic Tac, but they basically said, you know, these are just ice crystals. Right? We see them all the time. So there's a lot of noise there. We don't realize how much stuff there is in the sky above us.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, during any given military incursion incident, how many sensor platforms are there that are recording data? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, dozens, as far as I know.
Thousands,
right? And that data gets recorded and it goes somewhere. Now, I guess where I get confused about all of this stuff is it would only take one. So let's use Nimitz 2004, where the F is that data. And that data would elucidate so much here, right? You only need one. You don't need 144 cases, 143 you can't solve. One is a balloon. You don't need all that. You don't need the 18 those 18 specifically are super weird. You don't need any of that. You only need one. And we have no idea if the UAPTF had access to the data that, say, was on the bricks that supposedly went out on the Nimitz. We don't know if they had access to that level of data. And the thing that gets me is that data exists. It's there.
Right.
Yeah.
The idea that this is unsolvable, the idea that someone doesn't know is fucking absurd, guys. Like,
Right.
it just
But
doesn't-
isn't this what Avi keeps talking about? He's like, the reason I don't want to use the data. Well, there's two reasons, right? One is that once you're classified, then he's no longer free to speak his mind. And then two is then people are just going to claim dis or misinformation. And he's part of the cover up, or he's part of the disinformation campaign. So he has to completely extricate himself from that because, you know, yes, you're probably right. You're probably right. Somebody in the government does know one way or another, because it only takes one, but nobody's ever going to believe. I mean, and we live in even more of a world of disinformation now.
But it's not a matter of no one is ever going to believe it. It's a matter of they're never going to fucking tell us. This is the problem. It's like, well, can we just get some information about one case? We just want to know about the Nimitz. It's like, no, you can't have access to that information. Can the UAPTF get access to that information to tell the public? No, they can't either. Well, what the fuck are we doing here?
Right.
Yeah,
and that's why that's why we're pushing the big phone home too.
Well, yeah, totally, 100%. I support it 1,000,000%.
Again, in my more conspiratorial moments, and I tend to have these after a glass of whiskey, or talking for too much on Twitter with people. In my more conspiratorial moments, what I think is going to come out from all of this is, because again, like Zach is saying, right? Here's the thing with these events. If they are occurring, they are exceptionally rare, likely. And that's just not because of how rare they actually are happening or whatever, but just the times we get them on camera seem to be exceptionally rare. And so what the challenge is then is, if these events are rare, then collecting data on it is nearly impossible, right? It's the difference between, like, ufology is look at this like it is doing an experiment on a bowling ball rolling down a hill. Like it's a physics experiment. That's not what it is. This is like trying to find gorillas in the jungle.
I feel like it's trying to predict earthquakes.
Yes, another really good example. It's like trying to predict earthquakes. All you can do is study things post-event in many cases, and that's extremely challenging. It's much, much harder than kind of standard science. But anyways, in my more conspiratorial moments, though, when I think about this problem or this subject, what I think actually is probably what I think might happen here, and I think this is a big risk for the subject, is, again, the government looks into this. All they find is that in the 1990s and 2000s, we gave a sweetheart deal to some hotel owner in Utah, right? We gave him a bunch of money to study UFOs on a haunted ranch. Before that, we gave money to study psychics to find Navy ships and other things for the Soviet Union and whatever. That we have a history of a part of the military spending tax dollars on pseudoscience, on things that could never happen or cannot be true. And at the same time, we have a world in the United States especially, or a community in the United States especially, that appears to be more prone to and damaged by propaganda from different places than ever before. So from my mind, the most interesting or most important thing that we can understand about the UFO subject is, how do we stop it from being used for propaganda purposes? How do we stop that from happening? Because clearly, right, anyone looking at things like, anyone looking, say, at things like, I don't know, just the crazy conspiracy theories you see all over the place today. Anyone looking at those who's also involved in UFOs can see the parallels and knows that this sort of thinking bias occurs, right? It's true of any community. So in my mind, that's going to be the most interesting thing, or that's the most interesting part of this. And potentially the worst case scenario is the task force finds nothing, and then, okay, well, how did it happen then?
I mean, that itself is a form of propaganda, right? The idea that, so over here, you've got people that know, that have access to the data, somewhere someone has the data, right? Then they got the UAPTF. There's a layer of abstraction between the two. This is all just it's so infuriating. Again, someone has the data. This group that is been tasked with getting the data.
Well,
this is the whole thing for me. This is the whole thing for me. It's infuriating.
No, it's infuriating, and again, this is why we're trying to do this public effort to get more data and more information, so we can start clearing up some of the muddiness in this big pool. Like, it's time for this dirt to settle, and I think the way we stop having our government use this as a propaganda tool is to hold their feet to the fire, demand more answers, and bother and pester your congressmen and your senators until they start giving us some real substantial answers that we could actually look at and either from a scientific standpoint or from a skeptic standpoint, whatever standpoint you're looking at this from. I think that's how we maybe start attempting to have this conversation.
Totally. And there's too many real things going on in the world for us to be forced participants in this game.
Right.
Well, yeah,
that's
and
my
it's
point.
more important than ever that we trust the government, right? And it's we can't trust the government now, but maybe we can force some transparency and try to help, get that bond of trust there again.
The one thing I would say, so the one thing I would say too is it's really important, though, especially in stuff like this, to have set goals that you guys hit, right? Like you know what I mean? So it's have a milestone, especially too, to say like, well, what is it we want to get out of this project or out of calling these senators or whatever? Because again,
well, the goal for us is to get public congressional hearings. That's the goal.
So what I'm saying, I know you guys have like a set idea of like what you want to get out of this. What I'm saying is that's the one thing I think the one big mistake that the UFO world makes, especially in the face of like say skeptics, is because there are not like clear goals of like this is what I want to achieve or this is what I want to get out of this. Then at the end of it, if things do like go pear-shaped or whatever, they can come on and say, well, you didn't achieve anything, or you never had anything or whatever. That's just not true, right? People have made progress in this field. It's just a matter of like putting something on there to say we want to get to this by this time.
Right. No, that's a good point. And I think that's where we're gonna have to end this conversation. We pushed it up until the limit, and I have absolutely loved it. But I want to ask the group one quick question: yes or no? Is there a diamond in the rough, Zach?
What does that mean?
In other words, is there that one example? Do you think it exists? Do you think that one?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah. Totally.
One word. Yes or no?
Yes.
You do. Rather, what do you think?
Yes.
Jane?
Yes, and they may have destroyed it.
All right, you ruined the game, Jane. Chris, what do you think? Diamond in the rough.
I think we can make diamonds out of stringing lots of rough together.
Ooh. Okay, that's not a yes or no.
Data, statistics.
You're right.
Statistics on the data.
I knew it wasn't going to be a straight yes out of Chris.
No, it never is.
Yeah, well, I figured I'd try. It's still a pretty good answer, though. Okay, so well, we have 4 minutes left, and I wanted to play UFO video of the week because it was a really good one, and I wanted to get your guys' opinion on it. So I'm gonna play it real quick, and we're just gonna go fake or real. All right, and then maybe we'll break it down next episode. So here we go.
Can I answer now? Can I answer before I see it?
Can you answer? No, quit wasting time. Here we go.
Don't give away our bias.
Yeah, don't give away our bias. Oh wait, hold on. Let me take it back to the beginning here. All right.
That's pretty cool, whatever it's going on here.
All right. So that's the video.
That's Slimer.
It's like it looks like Slimer from Ghostbusters a little bit. But I mean, like, this video even threw Stephen Greenstreet off. He was like, after watching it a couple times, it's actually, if this is fake, it's really good. There's a couple of things that sort of scream to me that it's a fake. I'll turn down the volume while we play it. First of all, the quality is terrible. The convenience of where the camera starts when this thing pops through the window is really super convenient. There's a moment right here where you see two of them. So I'm wondering if this is a light source.
No, there's a mirror right there.
Mirror. Yeah.
Is it a mirror?
I mean, like a mirror.
How do we don't? I can't really establish that. No, we don't know. Kind of look like a mirror. Also, the kid doesn't really react. That's the thing that kind of like if there was a kid. Yeah, my kids
as a parent,
be terrified.
You wouldn't let your kid around. Like the biggest thing to me is that you would be terrified. You'd be like sitting on your couch, like still, and I don't think you'd let your kids go like wandering around it.
That was pretty dope effect, though.
It was a dude. If it's fake, which I think it is, hell of a job. Hell of a job. What do you got, Rather? You're muted.
Yeah, I think it's fake, but I think it's very, very similar to a lot of reports of ball lightning. A lot of reports that are deemed credible. Yeah, so I think that something like that could happen. I don't know about that video, but
So it actually
ball lightning is so elusive to have like that sort of like in the middle of that, like that just.
Well, it just knew how to work its way through the room. It's very odd for ball lightning. But what were you gonna say, Chris?
So it is confirmed fake. It was posted on Reddit. 2 days ago. Right. Yeah. So in the full clip, the ball starts looking at the TV and then it zaps into the TV and lights it on fire. And UFO of Interest on Twitter is one of the best accounts you can follow for finding fakes or rehashing old faked videos.
They used to comment on my channel a lot.
UFO of Interest. I actually will never forget one of the first cases at MUFON that I was completely faked out by was an image like that from like Russia. It was this big ball of light or whatever, and I was like, "This is crazy! How did they do this?" And then we had like a video guy come in and be like, "It's totally fake. I can do this 10-minute Photoshop, dude." So another important point, right? Just because you're like smart in one thing doesn't mean you can't be tricked, right? I get tricked all the time.
Lou, one more real quick before we go. Fake or real? Put that on the screen.
Yep. Yes.
Fake or real?
I can confirm this is really me.
Is you?
Yeah.
These are so good. It's like I'm always blown away by how good they are.
I don't know what's happening with our show, but I mean, this was gonna be. Well, here's what's hilarious, Michael, is that here's what's hilarious is that I had this for you. I actually had that pulled up at the exact same time on my my thing here, but here's what I wanted to talk about really quickly. I mean, we might as well. We're gonna go over, but hopefully not too long over. Here's what I wanted to talk about was these Stephen Greenstreet, or as I like to call him now, Stephen Meme Street.
Meme tweet?
No, Meme Street. Is I think that's what we're
I like Stephen Meme tweet.
Check out this meme. It's clearly foreign adversarial drones, bitch. I mean, dude, how funny is this, man?
I love the I love the UFO subculture. It is so fun.
It's absolutely wonderful. And by the way, all of these images are coming from uplifting tweets, so definitely go give them a follow.
As long as you don't take yourself too seriously, it's fun. If you take yourself too seriously, UFO Twitter is hell.
It's absolute hell. Absolute hell. Absolutely. But I wanted to just really quickly touch on the Stephen Mean Street, but we also got Rather Be Squidding in the collection. We got Rather in his like Discovery Channel, his new Discovery Channel.
There might be something watching me in the sky there too. I was
I just noticed the UFO in the background. Jesus. And then of course we've got Zac Mataluni. Like, dude, what is going on with this show? I don't know who this guy is. But look at this. Look at this, dude. This is, I mean, Luis Sheehan. I mean, this meme is just mean, but I did laugh. But we're just gonna skip to the next one. Think of, you know, like, dude, this guy's memes are like this. I mean, they're funny, man. They're funny,
Yeah,
and
no,
I
they're
like
great.
having fun with it. So we're gonna continue to do stuff like that.
Super uplifting.
But you guys, I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. It was absolutely wonderful. I know, Chris, you said in our private tweet session that this could be the last UAP show you do for a while. And God, I hope this show changed your mind on that, because man,
I'll get him back on my show.
Yes, get him back on
100%.
your show. We're gonna get him back on our show. I think this conversation is important. Your perspective really adds a lot of levity, and I think this is how we change the conversation. This is how we change the mindset. This is how we get our governments to stop trying to bullshit us, because you know what? We see the game and we see through it, and now we're going to demand you to change it. So man, I hope you come back. I hope you keep talking about this stuff, and next time hopefully we'll talk about some Skyhub and other things you're working on. I'm sorry it was a failure, but I don't think it was a failure. I think someone will pick that up and make it a success. And to be honest with you, I lobbied government to give you guys funds to get Skyhubs at every single university in America, because instead of giving $20 million to some, you know, government agency that, you know, is probably wasting it, we could give $20 million worth of Skyhubs to every university, let the kids, you know, play with the software and use the hardware and perfect it for you guys for free.
Yeah, the beauty about open source projects is they never really die.
Yes.
So the code lives on, and people are picking it up now. So
That's
had a lot of
awesome.
fun, guys. Absolutely loved being on here, and yeah, good times. Thanks for having me
Real
on.
pleasure, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Chris
man.
Cogswell,
you.
please, real quick, before you go, can you tell everybody where you can find your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want a kind of scientific, skeptical take on these things, my show is called The Mad Scientist Podcast. You can find it on all of your, all of the podcast players you have. Our logo is easy to find because it's the one with the jack-o'-lantern and all the explosions. Check us out.
Excellent. Chris, thank you so much, man. Sorry for the misspells on the thumbnail. The good news is we got the right one up now, and I can't wait to have you back.
Thanks, guys. No worries.
Later, buddy.
Later, Chris.
And then, of course, we've got Zac Cichy. Sir, gentleman, scholar, philosopher, great thinker. I can't wait to see you back for the Big Phone Home. We got you paired with some really fun people, so I can't wait to. I mean, I got you paired with Jamarl Thomas, and I gave you guys an hour and a half, and you guys are opening the entire Big Phone Home. So you're the first panelist on the show, so I can't wait to have the two of you guys get back together, because I listened to your podcast and it was cut short. I was like, no.
I know. I wanted that to go so much longer, and
we're gonna try and get you guys back together. Here's what's hilarious is I haven't heard from Jamarl yet. I have a feel he'll be there, and I'm just telling you he's gonna be there, even though I haven't confirmed that. But I'm pretty sure
He'll be there.
He'll be there.
He'll be there.
But dude, thank you so much for stopping by and adding your perspective. And we didn't even get to the real conversation that we wanted to have, which is fine. Who cares? We'll talk about it.
We'll get there.
All right, my man. We'll see you soon.
All right.
Wait. How do people find Zac?
Yeah. Well, your link is in the description below, but please tell people where they can find your podcast.
ProjectHuman.fm or twitter.com/ZCCICHY.
Right on.
Either
All right,
way.
Zac Cichy.
Yeah.
Thank you, my
Zac.
friend. We'll see you
All
soon.
right. Thank you so much.
Yep,
All right.
peace.
It's been a pleasure.
Jane Kyle, UFO researcher, Texas native, host of the Big Phone Home Ladies Hour.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. You ladies, just nobody knows this, but we're going to announce it now. For your first hour block and the Big Phone Home, who will be your interviewee for you ladies?
Well, we've got Lou Elizondo, and we're just going to be, all of us ladies are just going to be I don't know what the proper word is.
Prodding at Lou?
Yeah. It's going to be a really fun time. Yeah. So.
And who are the ladies joining you?
So we've got Jess Rogie, we've got Lynn from Spaced Out Radio, we've got NK Kranda, who is she's got a lot of experience with like abductees and experiencers. So it's going to be a really fun conversation, and I can't wait.
And then we've also got some pretty good guests, and we're working on one big guest for day 3. So hopefully we'll have an answer for you guys here in the next 24 hours. So yeah, I cannot wait. Jane, before you leave, please tell everyone where they can find your stuff.
Yeah. So if you're already on YouTube, so if you like being on YouTube, search UFO Jane, subscribe. I'll be talking to Mick West tomorrow, so that'll be a live. So tune in for that, and then probably next week we'll be dropping a video about the top UFO crashes.
Ooh,
so
excellent. All right, Jane. Well, please let us know so we can share the love.
Yeah, I will.
All right, my lady. Please do. Thank you. Gentlemen,
it was so funny because we had there were people in the chat I showed up to hear somebody slam on Tucker. When is this happening? And we just
man, we didn't get to Tucker, man. Nobody was gonna slam on Tucker.
I thought the show was great. I thought it was great.
I mean, that was a killer conversation, and I just love the levity that was brought to it. Rather always surprises me with his hard lines. I thought he would been every time I think Rather's going to agree fully with one of our guests. He's like, no, I'm going to fight it. I was just like, wow, okay, Rather's going to fight the scientists. Okay, what do you got, Rather?
I call him like I see him.
Not all
right, but
I call him like I see him. This guy, you gotta love him. All right, you guys, thank you so much again for tuning in to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFOs. Before you go, of course, want to say thank you to the sponsor, BlueMarlinChronicles.com. Want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all of the tunes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the show if you enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was one of our better ones. So, do all of that stuff. Check out the Patreon. Tomorrow we've got Christopher Plain on the debrief. He's going to be talking about from the debrief. He's going to be talking about the AIAA conference and the UFO discussion that they had in this aviation conference. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then on Friday, we've got John Greenwald coming back. He's going to be talking about the Showtime series UFO. And anything else? What else are we missing?
That's it. If you want to check out Chris Plain tomorrow on the Singularity Lab, just click the link below and make sure you subscribe.
Absolutely. Rather, you got anything else before we go?
Rather be squidding. Going to have a video on ball lightning and plasmoids out there pretty soon.
Excellent. Also, just FYI, guys, today we confirmed Robert Powell. He's going to be at the Big Phone Home, so that'll
fantastic.
Be really, really cool. So again, you guys, you're not going to want to miss it. Like, subscribe, share. We'll see y'all on Thursday for the Singularity Lab. So that's tomorrow, 4:00 PST. Later, y'all.
Later.
Peace. Wait, hold on. I'm not ready yet. Okay. Now, well, you know what? I forgot to. Here, I'm going to try and upload our calendar before these two clips play.
Okay.
So we could play our Patreon calendar for people. All right. But if it doesn't happen, I'm sorry. Here we go.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAP's 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom, you're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.
Just waiting for it to upload. Should be any second now. Yeah, here, maybe I'll play this one. Calendar next time. Sorry, guys. Love y'all. Peace.